Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. And this is our time where we get a few librarians from around the Monroe County Library System together to share some of the titles that they've been reading and that they want to share with others that we hope people pick up because we've really enjoyed them. So as we share our titles, if you're interested in getting your hands on any of them, you can do that in several ways. The first and probably the easiest is to simply call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and let them know the title that you're looking for, and they'll be more than happy to assist you. If you'd like to go online and request a physical version of a title, a hardcover or a paperback, you can do that through our online catalog, and that web address is on your screen now. There are some titles you'll see that are available via one of our two digital platforms. So for those, you would go to those apps, and the Libby app provides downloadable ebooks and audiobooks, and the Hoopla app provides downloadable ebooks, audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And the great thing about Hoopla is that if you see a lightning bolt next to a title, and almost all the titles have lightning bolts, that means that there's never a wait, that multiple people can have the same title checked out at the same time. And with us this week, I am Jennifer Granuski. I am the Dundee Area Supervisor. And our question to kick us off, since it's November and Thanksgiving is this month, is what is one thing that you are really thankful for? And this is really hard to just come up with one thing. Because naturally, I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for our elections that we just had, that they are free and fair. But I wanted to go with something a little different. So I decided I am really thankful for public broadcasting. I am thankful for PBS. I am thankful for NPR. I am thankful for Michigan Radio. As a parent, when my child was little, I loved all the PBS shows because no commercials is fabulous when you have littles, and the shows were so fun. And even now, if I happen upon an episode of Dinosaur Train, I kind of can't resist sitting and watching the conductor and all the dinosaurs. So I just love that. I love the information that they have. I love PBS NewsHour. I love Masterpiece Mystery shows that are on there. So yeah, if I retire from being a librarian someday and they want a PBS spokesperson, during their, they're trying to raise the money, I'm there for you. PBS and NPR, which I listen to in the car all the time. So I love being informed. I like knowing what's going on in our state, and I like having good shows on TV. So there's my thankful thing. Also with us this week is Adrienne Childress, who is a reference librarian at our Bedford branch. And what's one thing that you're thankful for, Adrienne?
I'm going to go ahead and say that I am thankful for the Monroe County Library System. They took a chance when they hired me, and I appreciate them doing that. And so I'm thankful, and I'm working hard to make sure that I give back as much as I can for them.
Thank you, Adrienne. I agree. MCLS really is a great place to work. So I love my coworkers, and I love the support from our library board as well. Also with us is Joyce Tapke, who is a processing clerk at our DAMI Administration Building. And what are you thankful for, Joyce?
Well, like you, had a hard time narrowing it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, you got the family, got the fact that you live in the United States, and it's so awesome, and the workplace, because talk about family-oriented coworkers. It's pretty awesome. I decided that the thing I'm most thankful for lately is my daughters, specifically my daughter Anita and my daughter Mary. For those who know me, I have a daughter named Laura who is special needs. And unfortunately, this year she has aged out of the school program. Another thing to be thankful for is Michigan actually educates special needs kids up to the age of 26. Unfortunately, she's aged out, and thanks to the pandemic shutting down various programs, I haven't been able to get her into a program. And my daughters, who were never signed up to be a special needs person carer, have stepped up, especially Mary, stepped up to the plate to watch over their sister to keep her safe, to keep her fed, which can be fun at times, and just so that I can come to work and know that she's well taken care of. So my daughters, especially Anita and especially Mary, awesome girls. Very
Aw,
thankful for them.
that's so nice to hear. That's amazing to have adult. I only have a 14-year-old, so I am still hoping that he turns into an amazing adult. So it's wonderful to hear that about adult children. Thank you, Joyce. And also with us is Jessica Otto, who is our head of collections. And what are you thankful for, Jessica?
Right now, I am most thankful for motherhood. So like Joyce, I am the parent of a special needs children. I have 2 special needs children. And so motherhood is not at all what I thought it would be when I first had started, realizing that that was going to be in my life. But in many ways, it is so much better than I ever thought it would be, just in a different and unique way. But it really is, I'm so thankful for it, because being the mother of 2 special needs children has really made me a better person. I think it's made me much more patient and responsible, and made me really understand what unconditional love and wanting to care for someone is. So, and I think that that transcends into other areas of my life, and hopefully makes me a better wife, a better librarian, a better exerciser. I don't know, worker outer. I don't know what that is. Just better in other areas of my life. So that is what I am most thankful for.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. And now we're going to move into some of the books that we've been reading throughout the last month or so, and things that we think maybe you might want to read as well. And I am going to ask Adrian if he will go ahead and kick us off this time.
Sure. So for my 2 books, I chose one that was actually done not that long ago, The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill, and The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman. So starting with The Woman in the Library, this book was published in June of this year by Poison Pen Press. It's an interesting meta mystery thriller. There's a writer named Hannah who is corresponding with a someone she met online named Leo. And in their correspondence, she asks him for information to help her write her newest mystery book. And there's a layer of the story wherein they interact with each other, typically through their email communications. And then there's another layer where Hannah is writing a book about a character named Winifred, who goes by Freddie. And Winifred meets a series of people in a library, and she uses them to write her own mystery book. And so there's several layers there wherein Freddie's writing a mystery book, and there's a certain amount of mystery about what's going on in her plot, and she's involved in a mystery that's being written by Hannah. And there's a lot of sort of whodunit going on. There's a lot of layers to, like, okay, so how is this story being influenced by the events going on at the higher level? It's a fast read. It can be a little difficult to follow at times because there are quite a few characters, although it's made a little bit easier by the fact that some of them get at the lowest level named things like Heroic Chin and Handsome Man. So those are a little bit harder to confuse with their higher level counterparts. If you might be interested in this book, if you've read anything else by Sulari Gentill, she wrote the 2018 Ned Kelly Award-winning Crossing the Lines. She's written quite a number of other books that may or may not be of interest. And then I will turn to The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. This book is written by Ellen Marie Wiseman. It was published on August 30th of this year, so it's still fairly new. This one is a historical fiction book set in Staten Island in the 70s. It involves real-world places and people, although the story is fictional. In this one, the main character, Sage Winters, she misses her identical twin who died 6 years ago from pneumonia. But at the start of the novel, she discovers that her sister did not in fact die. She was sent to the Willowbrook school because she had mental issues. And so she learns that her sister was sent to Willowbrook but has since gone missing. And so she goes there to help search for her missing sister. But because they're identical twins, she gets committed to the institution instead because they assume that she is her twin. If you've ever seen Shutter Island, there's quite a bit of similarity there between those titles. But there is a really deep plot. There's a lot of interesting bits of history thrown in that sort of ground the whole story in the real world. And it actually has quite a few twists and turns that, someone might not be expecting. So I would say definitely check it out, especially if you've read anything else by Ellen Marie Wiseman. She wrote The Plum Tree and the Orphan Collector, or her other notable works are the Roland Sinclair Mysteries. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely check that out.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrian. The Woman in the Library, I also give 2 thumbs up to. That's a good one if you just want a good mystery book with some extra layers you might not normally see. And then the other book I had not heard of, but that reminds me of Annie's Ghosts, I think, which is actually a memoir of a woman here in Michigan who, I can't remember if she thought her sister had passed or what had happened, but she was committed to the institution that was in Detroit, which I can't think of the name of it. And they've now turned into like, hey, you can go and sleep overnight here. But it was fascinating. It's a true story. I know the title is Annie's Ghost. And her sister wrote the book finding out what had happened to Annie and where she had been living and what this institution did during that time. And it was fascinating because I had no idea it was even there in Detroit, nor did I realize how large it was. It was almost like a city unto itself. And now I've just gone off on a tangent, but that sounds really good. As you were talking about, I was like, oh, that reminds me of that a little bit. So definitely check those out. And if you want Annie's Ghost, let one of us know. We'll look up the author for you. And let's have Joyce share next. And before I share Joyce's titles, I just want everyone to know I'm super excited about this because Joyce may have the book with the best title that I've seen all year. So go ahead, Joyce.
Well, of course, the book that you're talking about is Vacuuming in the Nude and Other Ways to Get Attention by Peggy Rowe. Well, first of all, Peggy Rowe is the mother of Mike Rowe. If you ever watched the show Dirty Jobs, or he has a number of shows out there, but Mike Rowe was the Dirty Jobs guy. And he said that his mother, all her life, wrote. She was forever holding a legal pad and a pencil. He said we didn't get, as kids, we weren't asked about our day. We were interviewed. She was a writer from day one. And her family, her husband, her 3 sons, Mike was the oldest, or is the oldest, always very, very supportive of her. But she just never could get much off the ground. She tried writing a book and was turned down from publisher after publisher, had a whole bulging file of rejection letters. And one point she was kind of grumbling to Mike about it. And she says, "You don't know what it feels like to be rejected." He said, "Mom, I work in entertainment." He says, "Do you have any idea how many interviews I've gone on?" He says, "You don't even get a letter. You just don't get called." But very, very supportive of her. Mike Rowe has gone on to create something called the Micro Works Foundation, which is to give money for people going into the trades. And I promise that comes into play. So he has a pretty large presence, especially on Facebook. He actually has a show on Facebook called Returning the Favor. Very big presence on Facebook. And one time when she was trying to get a hold of him, he wasn't answering the phone because she lives in Baltimore. He lives in California. So she wrote out this rather epic story about how she lost her big blue purse when she went to the store. And he was so charmed by this. He read it out loud. You can find it on Facebook. If you type in Mike Rowe, big blue purse, it's like a 10-minute story, the way he's just cracking up all the way through it. And of course, he's got a large following. So people were saying, "Your mother is hilarious." So they were pushing her, let's try writing a book. So of course, publishers were saying, "Well, yeah, you can write about your son, the famous guy, Mike Rowe." And she said, "I'm going to write about my mother." She wrote about her mother, who was a major baseball fan, where Peggy, was a horse girl. And her first book was called About My Mother. And she'd had a few stories and articles printed in various magazines and newspapers, but nothing big. And she just couldn't get a publisher to take this. So Mike said, "Well, let's do a self-pub." And I think he said, well, they did about 10,000 copies. He said, "We'll put it up for sale on the website for Microworks, and we'll use it as a fundraiser." And they sold out. They sold out fast. So they ended up getting a publisher, and she was picked up by this publisher. The book About My Mother, which we have, by the way, we have that, hit the bestseller list, hit the New York Times bestseller list. She was 80 years old. So 2 years later, she wrote another book called About Your Father. And it was basically about her husband, about marriage, about raising her family. Again, New York Times bestseller. That came out. I remember getting my copy during the pandemic. This one is, again, called Vacuuming in the Nude. And she does state that it's not a pornographic book. She does tell you in the book where that story comes from. But this is all about the writing journey, how she wrote, getting published, what it was like for her. And then, she thought this was to be the most difficult thing would be to get a book published. And then she came down with breast cancer. And she talks about her journey with breast cancer and dealing, having her support group. She said she was rejecting the idea of a support group until one day her husband said the most horrible thing to her. He asked her, "Do you want to go for a walk? It's a beautiful day." And she said, "I was so angry, I threw the salt shaker at him." She realized, maybe I do need a support group. So it's heavy material, but it's light material. She is a wonderful writer. Again, this one just came out. This one is about her writing career. She was a teacher before her children were born, and she used to write poetry for the kids that had to do with whatever they were learning. And this book has some of her poetry, some of her articles, and it's a very, very easy read. It's a chapter at a time read where somebody once told her that she keeps her books by her on her bedside so that if she's having a difficult day, she can sit down, read a couple chapters, and relax, and then go to sleep. So I thought that was a pretty high compliment. She is working on a fourth book. She's now 84 years old. She is working on a fourth book, and I'm really hoping that she puts out a book of children's poetry, because they're every bit as good as Shel Silverstein, in my opinion. So that's my first book. The second one is a lot more, I have to set it up a bit. It's My Travels with Mrs. Kennedy, and it's by Clint Hill. For those who might not be familiar, Clint Hill is the Secret Serviceman who was assigned to Mrs. Kennedy from 1960 to 1964. He is when President Kennedy was assassinated. As everybody's very familiar, he and his wife were in a car, and the car behind them had some of the Secret Service agents. And JFK was very adamant he did not want agents on the car with him. After the first shot, while both vehicles were moving, Clint Hill jumped off the side of the car, ran to the front, and as the third shot, when Mrs. Kennedy climbed out on the back, he's the one who pushed her back down. Basically, more than likely saved her life. He was a Secret Serviceman from 1958 to 1975. He served under 5 different presidents, from Eisenhower to Ford. And of course, this assassination was the most traumatic thing that he had ever been through. And he pushed it down, didn't talk about it. Turns out none of them did. Reading through some of the books that I will mention, none of these Secret Servicemen ever got any psychological help because they were understaffed. They had a funeral to put on afterwards. They had a funeral to make sure everybody was safe. He never talked about it. And after he retired in 1975, he was asked to go on 60 Minutes. He was interviewed by Mike Wallace. And again, you can find this on YouTube. It is absolutely heartbreaking when he talks about it. For the first time since the assassination, like 12 years later, he blamed himself. He said, I should have been faster. Even though everything happened in just a few seconds, he said, I should have been faster. He blamed himself for that. He descended in, he had PTSD, he had depression, he descended into alcoholism for a while. He did get sober in 1982. He's been sober since then. And when he was 77 years old, he was approached by fellow Kennedy Secret Serviceman Jerry Blaine to be part of a book I have here, library book called The Kennedy Detail. And Jerry's co-author, Lisa McCubbin, contacted him and basically sweet talked him into talking about this for the first time. Other than that interview, he never talked about it. And she interviewed him, and he discovered what people in therapy have learned, that when you talk about something, it gets better. He was able to get some of this weight off of him. And the two of them became quite good friends. And he was actually kind of sad when their collaboration was over for this book about the Kennedy Detail. In fact, he ended up collaborating with her again on his first book, Mrs. Kennedy and Me, where he talks about when he became part of her detail. He was actually really disappointed. He was taken off a presidential detail and given the first lady detail. And he's thinking maybe Eisenhower, he's thinking bridge and canasta, and this is gonna be so boring. Well, Mrs. Kennedy was not Mrs. Eisenhower. She loved to travel, and the two of them over the years became very close. They trusted each other. He knew that, she knew she could count on him. And that was the first book he wrote. The second book he wrote was called 5 Days in November. Again, he wrote it with Lisa McCubbin. The third book he wrote was called 5 Presidents, again with Lisa McCubbin. But if you'll note on the new book, he wrote it with Lisa McCubbin Hill. They have since gotten married. And this book is a little different than the rest of them, because what happened was he had a house that he had not been in for like 10 years, and they were getting ready to sell it. And his wife said, well, let's go clean it out. He said, oh, let's just call 1-800-GOT-JUNK and just get rid of it all. And she said, no. You got a medal for bravery after the assassination, which he didn't, though he deserved. And she said, I really would like to find that. And when they went through the house. They found that trunk that you see in the picture right there. It says Clinton Hill, the White House, Washington, D.C. He hadn't opened it in 50 years. And this book is basically what they found in that trunk. It is him describing to his wife what happened, all the travels they went on, and was full of memorabilia. That picture there is of Mrs. Kennedy in Pakistan, where she has been presented the gift of her horse Sardar. And he talked about how he was so grateful that he was not the person who had to figure out how to get that horse from Pakistan to Virginia and all the complications that arrived with that particular gift that she received. But this book, they goes over trips to Paris, India, Pakistan, England, Italy, Morocco, where they were served some delicious treats by the prince that turned out to be hash brownies. He said they were wonderful. He didn't realize until after he ingested it what it was. Yeah.
That was unexpected.
Yeah. So again, this book is basically, he talks to his wife Lisa about what they find, and then he goes into the explanation of what that is. And you do really feel like you're there. It is full of photographs. Some of the things that Mrs. Kennedy had written out in the back of the book, there's a literally photos of the scrapbook that she made for him when he was no longer her agent and he went back to the presidential detail. She made this lovely little scrapbook for him. Just a very, very interesting book. This one, he does not get into the assassination very much, just because he did that with the previous books. So, but it's extremely interesting. Just what this man has lived through, and really how terrific his memory is. If you watch any of the recent interviews with him, he's still sharp. He's 90 years old, sharp as a tack. And if you're at all interested in history, and I've been kind of fascinated by the Kennedys since I was in elementary school, so it's an extremely interesting look at Mrs. Kennedy and their relationship, and I do highly recommend it.
Excellent. Thank you, Joyce. That's fascinating. I didn't realize he had released so many books. We had read his first book for book club several years ago, so I was aware of that one, but I didn't realize he had done all the others. Thank you.
He has 4 books, and she has 6. The 4 with him, the 1 with Jerry Blaine, and I believe she did another one that was one of the first ladies. I want to say Betty Ford, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. And we'll have Jessica share her November reads next.
Okay, so in honor of November being National Picture Book Month, my first title is a spooky take on Thanksgiving traditions for both our younger readers and those who are young at heart. Thanksgiving by Geisel Award-winning author and illustrator Ethan Long teaches us that it's not just humans that celebrate Thanksgiving, but monsters as well. Who knew? So it's the 4th Thursday in November, and Vlad the Vampire and his group of monster pals, aka the Fright Club, are busy whipping up a delicious Thanksgiving dinner. Virginia Woolf is making the sweet potato casserole. Sandy Witch is mixing up the stuffing. Munford the Mummy is making the cranberry sauce. And of course, Vlad the Vampire is cooking the turkey, which is kind of odd. I feel like the vampire lore kind of tells us that vampires really only eat one thing. So to find out they eat turkeys. So while Vlad is outside cooking his turkey, he hears a honking sound. And Vlad's vampire family have arrived unexpectedly. There's his Uncle Gus, his Aunt Bessie, there's Joey and Schmoey, and even their family dog Spike. Vlad takes his family inside to introduce them to the members of the Fright Club. Everything is going great until Aunt Bessie discovers that Mumford is putting garlic into the mashed potatoes, which, as we all know, garlic is not exactly vampire friendly. So Vlad's family decides they're just going to take over cooking the Thanksgiving dinner. Aunt Bessie gets to work in the kitchen. Uncle Gus decides to cook the turkey with his own methods, which with really shocking results, literally. Joey and Schmoey try to help Fran K. Stein make a pumpkin pie, which doesn't exactly go as planned. And Spike the dog, well, he's more interested in eating the food than cooking any of it. The Fright Club's perfect Thanksgiving dinner is turning out to be the perfect disaster. Will Vlad blame his family for ruining the Fright Club's Thanksgiving, or will he learn that the most important part of Thanksgiving is not the food, but the family? Thanksgiving is a fun and original take on the preparations for the Day of Thanks, and teaches us what the holiday is really all about. So this book is actually a follow-up to Long's 2015 book called Fright Club, which introduced us to Vlad and his monster pals as they prepared for the annual Fright Club Halloween tradition, Operation Kitty Scare. If that sounds like it's up your alley, that book is available through MCLS as well. I recommend this book to fans of works by the amazingly talented Ethan Long, including any of his standalone picture books or any of his popular series titles. I also recommend this to anyone who just enjoys books about monsters celebrating holidays. Either way, you'll want to check this one out. It will not disappoint. And we're only a few weeks off here from Thanksgiving. So if you find yourself celebrating Thanksgiving in a few weeks' time between the family and the food and the football, be sure to take a moment and reflect and wonder, are any monster families out there celebrating Thanksgiving right now too?
Moving to ponder.
Yes. Moving on to my second title. So in honor of tomorrow being Veterans Day, tomorrow for those who are filming, tomorrow is Veterans Day, I wanted to take the opportunity to share the story of a veteran. So my second title is Fierce Valor, The True Story of Ronald Spears and His Band of Brothers by Jared Frederick and Eric Dorr. So I've read a lot of veteran biographies and autobiographies, but I picked this one because this book is my absolute favorite read so far in 2022 for many reasons, including that I feel that I literally willed this book into existence. Let me explain. So it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of World War II history, and I've read extensively on this topic. Ronald Spears has been mentioned in several other biographies and autobiographies that I've read over the years. And it's usually just snippets about him, a little bit here, a little bit about him here. And I've just, from the little bit that I had learned, I found him to be just a fascinatingly complex person. And for the longest time, I really wish that someone would publish his complete biography so that I could learn his whole story and not just the bits and pieces I was getting from other books. And so lo and behold, Jared Frederick and Eric Dorr made my literary dreams come true when they published this book in May 2022, just a few months ago. So you may be asking, well, who was Ronald Spears? Ronald Spears was born on April 20th, 1920 in Edinburgh, Scotland. His father, Ronald Spears, worked in the arms manufacturing industry during World War I. But then after the war was over, there wasn't as much of a need for like mass arms manufacturing, which resulted in his father not having as much work, and it resulted in some financial woes for the Spears family. So Robert, he immigrated all alone to America in 1923 in search of more opportunities and a better life for his family. And once he was established in Boston, Massachusetts, his wife Martha and his children, including Ronald, they joined him in America in 1924 when Ronald was just 4 years old. So Spears grew up in Boston. He started military training while attending the English high school in Boston, which had an excellent military program. He also participated in citizens military training camps during summer breaks. He graduated in 1938. Rather than going straight into the military, he decided to do college for a bit and try the workforce, but it didn't work out for long, because in 1942, not long after the attack on Pearl Harbor, he received his official draft notice. So when he entered the military service, because of his military training in high school, along with some of the extension courses that he took right after receiving his draft notice, he was able to enter the service as a second lieutenant. So Spears ultimately volunteered for the Parachute Infantry Regiment, and he served in the ETO, the European Theater of Operations. He went overseas to England in 1943 and he stayed there in England until his regiment was deployed to Normandy for the D-Day invasion of June 1944. And just a few weeks before he left for D-Day, he married his first wife from England, who he met in England, Edwina. They were married just a few weeks before he left for D-Day. Now, Spears' time in Normandy was the subject of some controversy and speculation and rumors. There's all kind of rumors from all different people who were there that swirled around him shooting one of his own soldiers in Normandy. Some claimed that this was an act of murder. Other people, especially witnesses, claimed that it was self-defense. And then there were also some rumors that he had gunned down some prisoners of war, that maybe he didn't necessarily have to handle it in that way. Then again, others who were there thought, no, he did. He said he did what he had to do. So I think that the authors of this book, they do a really good job of sort of just taking the facts of what are known about what happened in these situations, and presenting the facts and including eyewitness accounts and statements, and just letting the readers make up their own minds and their own decision about what kind of a person and what kind of a soldier he was. And the way I kind of look at it is I myself have never been in combat. And so I will never judge anybody for what's going on in combat, because that's not a situation I've ever been in. And unless I am in that, I don't think I'd ever know how I would react. I know that these paratroopers went into D-Day with Eisenhower having told them, you're not to take prisoners. We're not going there to take prisoners. We are going there to liberate occupied France. And if you think of it, these guys, they jumped out of airplanes into occupied France. They were surrounded by the enemy. I don't envy the decision that these soldiers had to make on that day. They didn't, even if they had the opportunity to take prisoners, if you think, where would they really take them? They had no headquarters. They didn't have a base of command. So if they decided to keep prisoners alive, they would have to keep them with them while they went through occupied France to try to carry out their mission, which to some extent could be a very risky thing. So I think it was a really hard decision for a lot of these guys. And it's just, again, it's an individual thing and not something we would ever know what we would do in that situation unless we actually were involved in it. So after Normandy, Spears was wounded in Holland in 1944. He was shot in the hip by a machine gun when he was swimming across a riverbank after completing a surveillance mission across enemy lines. He somehow managed to swim back to shore after being shot. He was sent back to England for about 6 weeks, and he returned to service in late November 44. Just in time to participate in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. And incidentally, while he was fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, his wife, Edwina, gave birth to their son on Christmas Day of 1944. While he was there in the Bulge. And then in January of 45, Spears became, he was promoted to a company commander, and he was given the rank of captain later that year. And he served in that role throughout the rest of the war. After the war was complete in late 45, he decided he wanted to make a career of the Army, and he returned to England to reunite with Edwina and his baby, only to discover that his wife's former fiance that she knew long before she had met Spears, who he had fought in the war and had gone missing and was presumed dead. She presumed him dead for years, had returned. And she also had reservations about leaving her family and England and raising her baby away from her family. And so a heartbroken Spears ultimately decided to allow Edwina to stay with her family and to move on with her former beau and raise this baby in England. So one of the things that I admire about Spears is after World War II, he never stopped working to improve himself and learn new skills. In 48, he attended an advanced infantry officers course. He was promoted to the rank of major shortly before he was deployed to Korea, where he served in an airborne regiment leadership role. So for all my love of World War II history, I've actually read very little about the Korean War history. And so I was glad to have the opportunity to read about it in this book. I felt like I had a much better understanding of the conflict in Korea, what happened and how that ended. So after the Korean War conflict, he enrolled in an intense Russian language course, which prepared him for a role in what was at the time East Germany as a liaison between U.S. troops and Russian troops. And while in Germany, he was appointed as the American commander of Spandau prison, which housed several convicted Nazi war criminals. And after his time in Germany, he found himself serving in Laos for a time, and then he even served at the Pentagon for a short time before retiring in 1964. So in his retirement, he was married a few times, including to his last wife, Elsie. He also enjoyed the company of his poodles. I think one of the photos that was shown showed his ferocious poodle. You know, I have to say that in all the military biographies that I've read, this is the one with the most poodle photographs, and it was definitely a plus. Yes. So in his retirement, he just sort of did his own thing. He had an early retirement. It just seemed like he loved life. He enjoyed it. In the 90s and 2000s, there was a lot of attention paid to him. So his character was actually featured in both the book that I've talked about the book before a while back here on Literary Libations, Band of Brothers. His character was featured in that, and then ultimately the miniseries version. And I found it very interesting that while a lot of the soldiers that fought with him were eager to be a part of that, he really wasn't. He had no desire for the Hollywood fame or fortune. He really wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't want to be interviewed for any of that. But he did ultimately end up going to the premiere of the miniseries to reunite with some of the soldiers, where he reunited with them for the first time in like 60 some years. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing that he did come on that. So so then Spears actually passed away in 2007. But this was, wow, what an amazing man, what an amazing life that he lived. I learned so much from his story and so much from his life, and I really appreciate that all that he did for our country. I think around Veterans Day, I think it's always important to share the stories of veterans, especially the ones who are no longer with us and aren't able to share their stories for themselves. So yeah, I really recommend this one for fans of World War II history, Korean history, the Korean War history, or Cold War history, because this book really does focus heavily on both the Korean War and the Cold War, if you're into that. So yeah, great book. It will not disappoint. So Yeah, those are my two titles. And actually, I just want to take a moment and say, if we do have any veterans watching our program, thank you. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. It is appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. And my November titles are, and I thought I had already talked about this one, but I couldn't find that I had. So my first one is one that I'm super excited about because I love the TV show Midsummer Murders. It is a British show. You may watch it on Amazon Prime. You might watch it on Acorn. You might want to watch it on BritBox. But Midsummer Murders has been around for years and years and years. And it looks like you're going to get a cozy, because, you know, murder is cozy. You're going to get a cozy British village and the murder is going to happen. But if you watch Midsummer Murders, and there's like 20 plus seasons now, and each season has anywhere from 3 to 6 episodes, you go into the village. Usually the village is having like a fete or, you know, a church bazaar or some sort of contest. And you start to wonder why these people keep getting together in big groups, because someone's going to die. And as the show goes on, they continue to die in more and more bizarre and strange ways. It's such a good show if you like British mysteries, not for children. Be aware of that. I mean, there's no language or anything crazy, but again, bizarre murders. And so Detective Barnaby and whoever his sidekick is in that season go in and they figure out who did it, and they talk to all the residents of the villages and figure out who did it. So I love this show. My husband and I watched this show. I've not seen every episode, but I've seen a lot of them. And when this book came out, I was so excited because it is a choose your own adventure set in midsummer. So you get to solve your own British village mystery. And in this one, it is the eve of the very first Villages in Bloom competition. So all the villages want to have the most beautiful gardens that they possibly can. And for whatever reason, apparently British people really like to win stuff. They really want to win. Like, they are committed. They want the most beautiful. And then a man turns up dead, smelling like jam. Who did it? And will you be able to figure it out before you die? Also in a likely bizarre yet humorous way. So that is what this whole story is. It's just like going back and reading the choose your own adventure books that I remember from my childhood, except it's set in the world of Midsummer Murders. You do not have to have watched the show to enjoy the book. If you enjoy mysteries, you can still enjoy the book. But if you have watched the shows, there are definitely a lot of little Easter eggs in the book calling out different episodes in the show. So it's just so fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I did go through it the very first time I read it. I did not cheat and try and go back and forth like, oh, I think I'll make a different decision. The very first time I read it, I did solve it mostly. And yes, it is possible to mostly solve the mystery. So I mostly solved it. And then I went back and through and tried to find all the different ways that you could also fail and find the one truly successful mystery solving one too. And there were actually a lot of different endings. Like I thought, oh, there'll be like 7 or 8. There were a lot. So good times with an interactive book. And then the other title is the brand new Stephen King novel, Fairy Tale. I am a Stephen King fan. I have not read all of his works. So there are lots of them that I also have not read. But I really, 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 really liked Fairy Tale. I think it's a good place if you've thought about picking up Stephen King, but you're like, I don't really like horror. This one leans much heavier to the fantasy side than to the horror side. And it could just be that I was in the right mood for a 600-page adventure story about a boy and a dog, the best dog. He's one of the goodest boys. Radar is the dog in the story, and a magical world. sometimes that's just what you want. You want an adventure story, and that's really what this is. Are there some horror monster elements? Yes, it's Stephen King, but this is overall a fantasy adventure story. And if you're not sure if you've ever wanted to pick up Stephen King, I think this would be a good starter for him. It has King's character building. The main character is Charlie, who's 16 or 17 years old. He's in his senior year in high school. He's going about his business, seems like a good kid, and he hears a dog barking at his neighbor's house. And the neighbor's always been cranky, and you hardly ever see him, and the house is kind of weird and creepy. But he hears the dog barking, climbs the fence, and he discovers that the neighbor, Mr. Bowditch, has fallen down and injured himself. And so Charlie starts taking care of him. And in the process of that, he gets to know Mr. Bowditch. He gets to know Radar, the amazing dog. Did I say that there's an amazing dog in this story? Because there's an amazing dog in this story. And just so you know, I don't want to give a spoiler, but if you're nervous about a dog in a story because of what tends to happen to dogs in stories, look away if you don't want to be spoiled. It's okay. So there you go. So just like if you need to know that before you pick up a book with a dog, because I know I have issues with that. So Radar's there. Charlie starts taking care of them. And in the process, he discovers some secrets that Mr. Bowditch is keeping. And one of those secrets is there's a magical world. And so in the process of other things that are happening, Charlie has to enter the magical world. And of course, you know, it's an adventure story. There's going to be a quest. There's a quest. So he goes on the quest. And King does a great job in creating these characters. And honestly, like you're kind of wondering at the beginning, like, what's going on here? Because he takes probably a good 100, 150 pages to build these characters. So you really care about Mr. Bowditch and Charlie and Radar. And you want them to succeed. And I'm not going to give you away what the quest is, but you want them to exceed. It's exciting, terrifying things happen. You're not sure who's going to win. It was just a good book. Like I read the first 300 pages or so, and then I read the last half plus of the book in one sitting because I wanted to know what happened. So it was a great escape fantasy. Now, if you are a Stephen King diehard, this might not be one of your favorite novels by him. I really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed how he weaves together a lot of different references to different fairy tales and magical stories, both past, like Grimm's fairy tales, and present with things like Game of Thrones. It was really interesting how he did that. So King didn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room in this book for a sequel, but I feel like if he did, I would be there to read it because I really did enjoy this one. It was just a good escape novel at a time when I really wanted an escape novel. So thank you to all of you for sharing what you've been reading this month. And thank you to those of you who listened. And we will be back in December to share what we've been reading next. Thank you. Bye.